It's role-playing in a part of Europe that doesn't feature prominently in most role-playing. This system offers a new look at some familiar terms and concepts with a setting so authentic it features a section on beer. I'm Rex Celestes, the Chicago Geek Guy. Today on That's How We Roll, it's time to talk about that sweet nectar of the gods. No, I'm not talking about beer. I'm talking about red-eyed rabbits, Ambrosia. Ambrosia takes inspiration from the medieval Low Countries. That's Belgium, Holland, and Luxembourg for everyone who missed that day in geography. It's a familiar fantasy setting with several different trappings. It's fresh, but still familiar. Likewise, the system uses a similar lexicon of terms with a few novel twists along the way. I want to thank the folks at Red-Eyed Rabbit for offering me a copy of the game so I could make this video. This is not a review, however. That's How We Roll introduces the rules to get you playing and forming your opinions just as quickly as possible. Like many role-playing games, Ambrosia uses a series of numbers to define characters. In this case, 3 sets of primary abilities, each with 2 secondary abilities. When the player's abilities differ from their characters and there's a chance for failure, it's time for a check. To pass a check, a player rolls a 10-sided die and adds the value of the appropriate secondary ability. Meeting or exceeding a GM-defined target value means the character succeeded in their task. Let's say a character, Weeba, attempts to climb a wall. The GM sets the target number at 10. The player rolls a 10-sider and adds their dexterity to the roll. If the two equal 10 or more, the character scales that wall. 9 or less, and they just can't find their footing. Ambrosia describes this as a dexterity 10 check. Damage and other mitigating circumstances may add other bonuses or penalty to a roll. 2 characters acting against each other force an opposed check. Players each roll that 10-sider and add the appropriate secondary skill. Whomever rolls higher wins the contest. When players work together, their players get to add the appropriate secondaries abilities of all the participating characters to the roll of a single die. It's up to the GM to determine how many characters can help at a task. At some point, too many cooks spoil the broth. To keep things interesting, Ambrosia offers a few mechanics to help with roleplay. Ones, whenever rolled, means a failed check. Secondary abilities are not added. A 1 is a 1. 10, on the other hand, explodes. That means you get to roll another die whenever you roll a 10. This begs the question, how many 10s can you roll in a row? Characters can also apply extra effort to a roll for when they really need to complete a task. In this case, a player may remove points from their primary ability or the stat karma to add to a result. A player decides to apply extra effort after their initial die roll. There's no risk to expending the point. With proper stat management, players can ensure characters succeed at a crucial moment. If the situation allows it, players may also use a point from a primary ability or karma to re-roll a dice. This does introduce some risk to the task, but sometimes a character's gotta do what a character's gotta do. Let's take a look at how that works. Weeby is still trying to climb that wall. A roll of 6 plus his dexterity of 2 doesn't quite make it. If this is a crucial moment, Weeby's player might decide the character applies extra effort. They can add 2 points from their physical ability or karma to the roll to succeed. Or they can use 1 point and roll again. Ambrosia handles all types of conflict with the same mechanism. two people slugging it out on the battlefield, or two courtesans engaged in a fiercely quiet battle of wit both use the same system. The characters decide who goes first, then they enact their strokes and counterstrokes within the constraints of their abilities. Within combat, characters can apply physical, mental, or social damage to one another. Who asks first depends on initiative, the sum of a character's dexterity and intuition. Characters with high values move first. A combat round lasts until each character involved has an opportunity to initiate an action. Inside a round, characters may spend up to 10 action points. Action points reflect the amount of effort needed to do something. Swing an axe, deliver a rousing monologue, utter a cutting and clever insult. Within a round, characters may use action points to respond to acts initiated by others. Each character starts combat with 10 action points, and they are replenished at the beginning of their turn. The skills players roll depends on the action and reactions of the characters. Let's see this work in a combat example. Lars and Roos have squared off for a duel. The two have already drawn their rapiers and look intent on skewing each other. With initiative 5, Lars lunges forward with his thin weapon. Based on the encumbrance of the rapier, that will cost him 7 action points. Roos attempts to parry the blow in response, costing her 7 action points as well. The action is resolved with a dexterity versus dexterity roll. Lars's 12 against Roos's 15 means she successfully redirects his lunge. With only 3 action points left, Lars decides against doing something new and allows Roos's player to start their turn. Roos gets all 10 action points back at the beginning of her turn and decides to draw a dagger for her offhand, 2 action points, then attack, 7 action points. Lars can't parry with his sword or evade the blow with only 3 action points and decides to utter a withering insult, 2 action points, at Roos to cause some social damage. Without any action points to defend against Roos's blow, Lars will suffer physical damage automatically. Without enough action points to give Lars a witty comeback, Roos will suffer social damage. Ambrosia differs from many systems in how it deals damage. Characters receive damage in the same 3 aspects as primary abilities: physical, mental, and social. Damage is cumulative but not additive. I know that sounds strange, but let's take a look at how it's applied. The application of damage uses this chart of 4 rows of 10 dots. Each successive row represents greater trauma and greater penalties on future die rolls. A damage roll consists of 1d10 plus any bonuses granted by a weapon, a magic spell, or creative banter. Rolling a 1 does not mean no damage, but rolls of 10 still explode as usual. Let's use the duel between Lars and Roos as an example. Attacking with her rapier, Roos rolls 1d10 plus 12. That's the weapon's power value for a total of 18. To apply this damage, we count down the rows to fill in the 8th dot in the 2nd row. This leaves Lars with severe trauma, and he will have to subtract 2 from every future roll based on strength or dexterity. Since this is severe trauma, Lars also has to roll a strength 1 check to stay conscious. Yeah, Ambrosia gives the rapier proper weapon damage. It's wicked against unarmored opponents. For the purposes of this example, let's assume Roos hits 2 more times, scoring 12 and 18 for damage. Lars now has a 2nd pip filled on the 2nd row. This means he must subtract 4 from strength or dexterity rolls from here on out, including the strength 1 check he needs to stay conscious. Assuming he's still awake to take Roos' 3rd roll for damage, something interesting happens. Since the 18th pip of damage chart has already been filled, damage drops down a row. Lars now suffers an incurable physical trauma based on the location of the darkened pip. According to the chart in the book, Lars loses use of his left leg and racks up some significant penalties to his appearance and dexterity. At least he's unconscious by this time. Receiving an incurable or critical trauma automatically knocks you out. Oh, critical trauma? Your character needs to roll an ability check of 1 depending on the damage received or pass on to the great unknown. Did I mention how damaging a rapier can be? Several factors can mitigate damage, notably armor for physical attacks. There's not as much protection available against mental or social damage. The biting sarcasm rolls off your masquerade mask, doing only 1 point of damage. In any case, physical, mental, and social combat in Ambrosia carries with it some serious consequences. Engage at your own risk. Of course, Ambrosia includes rules we don't have time to cover here. But this episode went over the basics. Like the setting, it's a familiar enough, yet a different enough system to refresh the medieval-ish fantasy RPG genre. Thanks again to Red-Eyed Rabbit for providing me a copy of Ambrosia for this video. Please leave any criticisms or thoughts in the comments below. If you're looking for your own copy, you can find the PDF and hardbound editions at DriveThruRPG. Free quick start rules are also available. Oh, and one last thing. Personally, I think Ambrosia is worth the purchase if only for the description of the setting. It provides just the right detail for an overlooked part of fantasy Europe. And hey, beer. I'm Rex Celestes, the Chicago Geek Guy, for That's How We Roll.